In three, two, one. Hi, everybody. This is Spath, your Poker Insider. And today I'm here with special guest Paul Otto, online named Internet. He's a poker coach and grinder over in the European market. He's presently in Edinburgh, Scotland. Paul, are you with us this morning?
Yes, I am. Hey, Al, thanks for having me on your show.
Well, it's our pleasure to host you here uh, with the Poker Insider, and let's get right to it. I've been reading a lot online over at it's is it Poker Market Flow or is it just Poker Market, the site that you're in, mostly on?
Yes, the site we've launched about 2 years ago, it's called pokermarket.com, and you'll find a lot of content on there. So,
And I noticed just recently that you had a new guide, Crushing Online Poker. Is that something that you just offering?
so when you join the site, when you go to pokermarket.com and you sign up with a new account, one of the benefits you're getting is a guide to crushing online poker, which is a reasonably professional video I put out there for people for free so they can get a taste of the style, how online poker works, my coaching style, the video style, some of the starting things you can expect on the site. And in essence, what it is a short video that goes over the important points, the important bullet things you have to fulfill in order to become a winning online player.
And I understand that back in 2010, you were one of the top 10 earners on On Game Network. Is that when the GTO style was developed or used by you, or were you just after you made your transition from play money to real money?
Well, the top 10 winners thingy, that's more of a,
Over in
marketing
the
thing. It's always difficult to market
European
yourself,
market.
but there
He's
was definitely
presently
one
in
period in time
Edinburgh,
where I
Scotland.
was
Paul, are you
playing
with
mostly
us?
on the On Game network, which actually still exists, and I was one of the top winners there for probably the entire year in the top 10 or so. And I think back then GTO wasn't really a big part of online poker strategy. It was more just back then. I mean, there were certainly GTO aspects to the gameplay, but back in the day, that was 5 years ago or so. Poker was a bit easier than it is today.
And where did you start playing? What sites did you start playing on?
So I actually did start playing the play money games on game back in the day. So this was, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. Where yeah, I was just as any online game you get into, a friend sends you a link, you sign up, you click around a little bit, and I started to have fun. It was very entertaining for me. And the first real money game I entered into was also on game, and it was a fixed limit, low stakes. They had available 15 cent, 30 cent fixed limit hold'em, which at the time for me was like really exciting, great real money poker.
And how long did you stay in the play money area before you developed enough skills that you ventured in, or did you earn your money through free rolls, and or did you just dive in and deposit?
Well, that's so far back in the past. I didn't do accurate record keeping back then, so it's very difficult to answer for sure. But I do distinctly remember that on the one on game side I was playing at back in the day, they had a daily free roll, and I tried to play that every single day after school. I was eager to play in that, and I did get into the money. And of course, it's one of these free rolls with a couple of thousand players, and only the top 20 get some money. And I did make it into the money, and that felt really good. And that was certainly part in what kicked me over to the real money side.
I'll bring up something of my past. Back in the late 1990s, when Poker Pages was just on the scene, which was a big site that
Mhm.
Tina and Mark Napolitano run. They used to run some free rolls, and I used to sit in my California living room, and it was dial up at that time. And at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, they would have 400 available slots in a free roll for some money, and you would sit there and you would try to time it. How many seconds would it take the dial up to go through and get a ring to get so you can get it on to get a seat? Because at precisely 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whenever they ran it, it would fill up in like 4 seconds flat, just 4 seconds
that's
flat. And
that's
so you'd
amazing.
have to time it to try to get into that game, and then it started growing from there. And then Poker Spot was developed, and some other sites, and then Poker Pages developed the Bugsy's Club, and it went on and on and on from there. But where did you learn poker, or where did you start? Was it just on the internet, or at a friend's house, or where did you get introduced to poker?
No, I did learn the rules and all the super basics only online, just through, I was playing different browser games at the time, and poker was just one of them. I was just, clicking some buttons, having some fun. And I got more serious about the game when I went to a bookstore somewhere in California, and they had a poker book on sale, and I was just randomly intrigued by it and bought it and read the strategy in it, and that must have been sort of the turning point where I started to see it more as a serious game than the button clicking game. And I think that book was Matthew Hilger's Getting Started on Online Poker or so. I think that's a famous book. And it did help me to, when I made the transition to real money, to be a winning player from the start, which is something which is I'm very happy with. Because if I wouldn't have been a winning player at the start, I probably would not be where I am today.
Matthew Hilger, as a matter of fact, I reached out to him yesterday. It was his birthday, and I reached out to him. He went over, took a job with Poker Stars, and he's and I think it's in Dover, or where's he at over there? And he's near you though, and he's
Well, it's Isle of Man. I've
Isle of
been.
Man. That's it, Isle of Man. You're absolutely right. He gave up his Dymat Publications, as I understand. He had the publishing firm. He had Pearl Jammer and Ed Lynch and all of Abe Styles, and they did winning tournaments one hand at a time. That great series of 3 books. He's done his books, of course. He's got the book on poker mindset and Internet Texas Hold'em, and he has that Internet Texas Hold'em website. So Matthew's been around and has added a lot to this industry, and I hope to have him on as a guest in the next month or two. I've got a lot of people lined up, and Matt Savage and Brad Wilson and Ed Miller and Jonathan Little and Danneman has told me he has to wait till after taxes. He's in Baltimore, Steve Danneman, and he's an accountant, and he has this is big tax season for him. So he said, no, I can't. I got twins at home. I can't do it. I'll do it later on. So I'm interested to see. He's very lighthearted, and of course Kenneth James is going to follow you next week. So we've got a good host of guests coming on, but none more important than the one we have today. We have Paul Otto. Online name is Internet. Now tell me about that Internet name. Where did you come up with that, and what's missing from that name?
Well, the screen name I use online at most poker sites at the tables, and my handle, which I use on forums and in our own poker market site, is Internet, spelled with the first letter L. And it's the story is more of a trolling type story. When you're younger online, you're more in this like feisty mindset, and it's like make up a name which no one uses, which is very unorthodox. And I thought calling yourself Internet was one of the more funny ways to call yourself, and it stuck with me. I think it's easy to type, easy to spell, easy to recognize, so it has a sort of good ring to it. And yeah, now I'm known as the Internet guy.
So you coach, you make videos, and what else do you do?
Well, it's I've been making a bigger dent in the poker universe as of late. So we have the pokermarket.com website, where I'm a big part of, which does online tournament staking, live tournament staking. So for people to buy shares and sell shares in their tournaments. We have coaching material on there. We have a list of great coaches on the site that cover everything from Omaha and live poker and online poker and heads up and full ring and anything. You can find coaches for everything on there. And we feature coaching videos, poker literature, and I myself make coaching videos online for a pretty long time now. I'm not sure for how many years, in both English and German. And that's something I do. I do a lot of private coaching, just one-on-one coaching with people that are interested in improving their online game. I'm mostly proficient in the online six max environment. I do heads up and full ring as well, but just Hold'em, six max. There's professional players that try to improve their game. They sometimes talk to me. And I'm also very active on the forums. So we have a pokermarket.com forum. I'm on the 2+2 forums. I was on various other forums before. So if you see, a long, big poker discussion, you can be sure I'm on it somewhere.
And you'll be your input will be by internet.
Yes, on almost all sites. So my screen name is Internet, and I use different avatars, I suppose, but you'll see me.
The one thing you didn't say just then, I've listened very carefully to what you said about six maxes and the heads up. You didn't mention anything about tournament play. Is it
Hmm.
because tournament play is so hard because of how long it takes if you're going to coach somebody or put a video out, it's not like you can do some sit and goes and do it in an hour. But if you're doing an MTT, what's the what's the difficulty that you find in trying to give somebody
Well,
the coaching there?
Well, I think with the way online poker is right now is that it's very you need to be very specialized to be good at something. There's very few people that excel at different variants, and I consider tournaments to be very different from cash games. And of course, I play tournaments myself, and I'm not a fish in them or anything. But I wouldn't consider myself a good enough tournament player to make videos about it or to coach about it. Anyone who's willing to pay money for it can probably find someone that's better at them than me. Um,
So
so.
no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I myself concentrate on the cash games, both full and six player.
Mhm.
But the tournaments, I do the sit and go. They do the heads up tournaments and things like that. But somebody came to me the other
Oh.
day from New Jersey and he wanted MTT training. I said, well, that'd be fine, but how about this? To save you some money, how about calling me when you're down to 20 people left in the tournament? Because you're going to have to pay a lot of money for me for hours to sit around and watch maybe one
That's
hand every,
true.
10 minutes or something like that. Because, we could do some early training, how to get that bankroll or that stack increased in the early and how to get around the landmines that are out there, especially in free rolls and low entry
Hmm.
tournaments and rebuy tournaments. Or we can do the middle part on how to, amass some chips so that you don't run out of chips when you get near the bubble. That seems to be almost everybody that comes to me that plays MTT has the same thing. Says, I know how to play. I'm really good, but when I get right down there to the bubble, I'm just running out of chips, and they're not realizing it happened a long time before that the trouble
Yes.
started and they didn't
Well,
do anything about it. And it's too late to do anything when they're have an
right.
inconsequential
Well,
stack.
the start of the tournament though does play a lot like cash games. I do think when I play tournaments myself, the first few levels or the first day, even in live tournaments, I'm can be really really good at. But the skill set does change from those deeper stack situations to the shorter stack situations, and in those ones, I think strategy can be very unintuitive, at least for a cash game player.
It's true. How about you? When you were playing and you were playing the free, and then you started playing for money. What was it? What was the turning point where you said, "Wait a minute, I got this. It just clicked. This, I wasn't doing this. I just clicked." And was there a point in time where it just all came together for you?
I think it's a very good question. There's been several points in my poker career where I've been like, "Oh, this all makes some sense. This is all coming together." One of the more on the success scale is when I used to play after on game. The second side I was playing at online was iPoker, and there was a point in time where I played a lot to clear a big bonus.
Yes.
And when I successfully cleared the bonus after a long month's grind, I finally reached a total bankroll of $10,000, and I was so happy with myself. I was like, "Man, you did it! This is like real money. This is amazing." So that was one big turning point where I was very excited.
My turning point was I was playing at Poker Spot one night out in California, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning California time, and I had just beat about 1,400 players in a free roll, and I won $22, and I was so amazed and so excited. But there was nobody I could call. Everybody's sleeping on the East Coast. My wife was asleep. I couldn't celebrate, and I'm there, looking at myself, and I'm screaming to myself, "Oh wow, I did it! I conquered the world!" And it was like, all right, tell the dog, tell. I was there all by myself.
Yes, that's one of the drawbacks of playing online is when you're home alone, you can't cry to anyone when you run bad, you can't celebrate with anyone when you run good. Although luckily we have a small poker community here in Edinburgh now, so that helps a little bit.
No, that does, and I think that's the biggest thing about online poker: the anonymity of people, the embarrassment factor. Although some people might um, talk bad about people when they do something really silly at the table and they suck out, or they just do something unconscious and get lucky. Most people that play online, especially when they first start out, they're so glad that their name is not associated with their name. And so
Mhm.
with the mistakes they make, and a lot of people do the first couple of years, and then they latch on to a new name because they don't want to be associated with that idiot that was the first name, because you have no there's no shame on the internet. Nobody sees you. You can make those mistakes and just move on. There's so many different people that are on the internet, but once you establish yourself as a player, such as yourself, you
Yes.
you want to live up to the reputation. You want to live up to the name. So you have to earn that respect every time you sit down.
Yeah, there's certainly some sort of dichotomy in the online poker pros. Some of them like to be very public, like myself, use the same name on all the sites, all the forums, and then go out there and show yourself. But there's also the opposite, which are players that are, even though they're successful, they still keep changing their names. They don't want to, be known or anything like that. Which I find very interesting how every player makes that decision for themselves.
Okay. Before I ask this next question about if you weren't doing poker, what would you be doing today? I'd like to thank those that are on Heartbeat Poker, Drush and Samo for hosting us today. And every Sunday that I do a Sunday conversation, coming up, as I mentioned, we're going to have Cowboy Kenneth James next week, followed by Gene Hull, a poker coach and pro out in Las Vegas. Those will be at 12 o'clock Eastern Time the next 2 weeks on Heartbeat Poker. So be sure and follow Heartbeat Poker right here on Twitch TV. So tell me, what would you be doing if cards was not part of your life?
I've asked myself that question many a times, and I don't have a clear-cut answer for it. But I believe I would have stayed in school much longer, probably got a degree, and then eventually found a job in some engineering firm or insurance company or so. But I can't tell with certainty.
For certainty, would you still be in Edinburgh?
Almost certainly not. No. So the location I chose in Edinburgh is that for a European citizen, you do not pay any tax on gambling winnings in the UK, and Edinburgh is part of Scotland, is part of the UK. So the reason I'm here is poker, and yeah, I would almost certainly not be here without it.
Well, Drush is asking the question to you, Paul. He says, "What do you think about poker becoming popular on Twitch? How popular do you think Twitch is going to make poker?"
I really watch a lot of Twitch myself, not just poker, lots of games. I think it's a great new entertainment format, which I think is a very growing market in that people, content is created by the people for the people instead of preset on some, old device like the television. So I do think seeing poker on Twitch makes me very, very happy, and I quite enjoy seeing it on there. And I hope it brings a lot of players to the game and keeps poker as famous as it's supposed to be.
Cool. Now let's get into this GTO. And for those of you that are listening, and especially those in America, this is not your GTO that Pontiac made back in the 60s, okay? This is game theoretical is it optimization? Is that or optimum?
Well, in fact, the term GTO is more of a colloquial term. It means game theoretically optimal, I suppose, but the mathematical terminology is slightly different from that. So yeah, with poker, we've come to this sort of point now, which you get with every sort of new piece of game or every new technology. That first, people do it for fun, and then they do it by experience, and then they throw the math at it. And right now with poker, we're at this point where a lot of math has been thrown at it, and the GTO, the math type poker thing, is the most successful and the most respected way of playing. And I myself have a degree in math, so I understand a lot of how that works, a lot of the things. And I'm very into using the new programs and always the new things on the block that you can use to calculate real strategies. which actually see slightly with a sad eye because I used to be really, really good at poker without the new tools which are out there, like those game theory optimal solvers like PioSolver or Simple Post Flop, which they output strategies which are extremely strong, and I was able to come up with similar strategies on my own, and now everybody can just using some software, which is a little bit sad.
So poker is solved by a math problem under the GTO style. Is that really what essence it is?
Well, the details are, the more you go into the details, the more complex it gets. But, um, for example, you would have back in a couple of years ago, people would post hand histories on the forums, and people would discuss what the best action was, and if someone was going to throw out some calculations, looking at some equities, looking at some percentages, how much of a range you have to defend, that would be considered, GTO. That would be considered very good exercise, very good math on it. And nowadays, all the math anyone has ever done on a sheet of paper and a forum can be automated by software and naturally can be done much, much quicker and much, much more accurate. And that's sort of the new GTO thing that's going around.
Is there a person other than yourself that's associated with the GTO style that was the either the inventor or the person that introduced it? Like everybody says, Al Gore introduced the internet. Who introduced the GTO style?
I'm not sure about the particulars. I do know that John von Neumann, he's like a famous mathematician, and one of his early books on economics, he did um, invent game theory, I believe, and he did use an example of poker play in his most famous publication. So, in a sense, you can say it dates back all the way to the invention of game theory by John von Neumann. And in poker theory really applied to the modern games. I do think David Slansky and the crew on 2+2 Publishing definitely made a dent in that. They applied easy principles for poker play, which are based on mathematical formulas. But really, I'm not sure how the history in terms of applying GTO really comes about.
Okay. Um, Jerry DeCripney, who's an individual from California. He's on online here on Twitch. He asked a question about moving up in stakes. How did you adjust or prepare that, and did you multi-table or single-table at first? Let me just couch that by saying that Jerry plays between 30 and 40 tables at a time at the micro limits. He's got a team of techs that are working on and have developed a HUD conversion to work on certain sites, including full flush poker. And so he's a very interesting individual that you might enjoy talking to offline as well, because he might give you insight into something. And I know he would enjoy talking to you. But his question again is, how did you adjust or prepare as you moved up in the stakes online? And did you multi-table or single table at first?
So I was going to say I play several tables at once, but then you said he plays 30 to 40, so I now feel a bit inadequate. I I started out as an online player, and as such, a young kid needs always a little bit hyper, so I did start off right off the bat always playing at least 4 tables, I believe. But these days I do play a little bit more than that. It varies a little bit, but between 8 and 10 perhaps. So yes, I think multi-tabling is at the very heart of online poker. I believe there's very few people that play one table of online poker. It's just boring.
And the
But
adjustment as you moved up?
in terms of moving up, I haven't moved up in a while, so I'm not sure how I used to do that. But I typically don't consider it such a big thing. I would just be, well, you still get 2 cards in Hold'em anyways, and you get your chips to bet with, and not too much changes except the numbers get bigger. So I wouldn't really consider it too big of a thing, the moving up and focusing too much energy on it. Certainly if your bankroll management is reasonably aggressive, and when moving up you want to pay close attention to reducing your number of mistakes, then you may make some adjustments. But in general, I think don't change a winning strategy if you have the bankroll and the skills necessary. Just play a different higher stake game.
Did you ever move up at one point where it really impacted your bankroll? You took some hits, you found it the going tough at first, and you thought about, well, maybe I need to go back down, or did you go back down, get regain confidence, regain your bankroll, or was there any a point where you said, I'm just gonna stay here and get it done?
Yeah, so me personally, I'm very conservative with my bankroll management, potentially to the point where it's too conservative and not maximizing my expectation. As such, I never really had any, problems moving up and then getting, hitting a bad run and being forced to move back down. But I did find myself when I play some of the higher stakes games online, like those, with 4-digit buy-ins, that when I get a bad run there, I do feel kind of bad, and that's why I don't really play too much higher than NL 1000 regularly.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, one of the other questions that was asked before we came on the air today, somebody wanted to ask you, was the HUD use. Are you using any? What got you into you, or if you are using the HUD, and what advantages do you see for a new player starting out that would come to you as a coach, for instance? Would you
hmm
introduce him right away to using the HUD, or would you start him out trying to learn the game without it and then introduce it?
Yeah, I've coached many players who are using a HUD, but they're using it incorrectly, or they don't really understand how the numbers work and what they mean. So if I was introducing someone to online poker, I would coach someone that's reasonably new. I would coach them without a HUD and first, explain to them, what is a value bet, when do you bluff, what are the conditions that need to be met before you take a look at, how the stats work and how does that impact the decision. I see a lot of online players in the small stakes these days that prioritize the stats and the HUD way over the actual action that is taking place at the table. So they will say things like the opponent folds too much to C bets and will take that as an excuse for betting, even though their hand or the situation may not lend itself to betting at all. So I would be careful for new players using software they're not,
So it can be a crutch.
yeah, so I would see it more as help in making good decisions more than doing the decisions for you.
Okay. I
Yes.
know that when I teach, I try to teach a solid fundamental core of poker skills so that they can take it to the next level. They can take it to live games because there's no HUD, there's no hold'em manager, there's no one to help you when you go play live. So if you don't learn to see what bet sizes mean and how people are playing position
Yes.
and things like that, you don't learn the essence of the game, and you can succeed only if you're lucky at these live games. So I'm going to get my first introduction because I don't even use it myself. But Jacripney, the guy I told you about before, who's developed the software, he's going to give me a tutorial on it here in later this month or next month,
hmm
and I'm going to introduce it, and I want to see the difference between the way I coach now and how I would coach if I involved this new system into it. I'm not going to go there. I know I'm not going to go there, but I want to know more about it. You know,
Right.
so I'm out there. I'm just learning that myself.
Right. Yes, I think especially as a new online player that's not used to HUDs, you should certainly play in a game where HUDs aren't even possible. A lot of poker sites are cracking down on software usage, on software aids. There is on microgaming they have the anonymous tables where since there are no screen names, no hand histories, you cannot possibly use a HUD. And there's Unibet which does not allow any HUDs as there's no hand history supplied. PokerStars has recently cracked down on some of the more advanced functionalities of HUDs, which is very controversial. But so I do think learning poker, playing poker without a HUD is very important and is the skill that has to be mastered first before you introduce the HUD as an additional layer of information.
We got a question from Cat Daddy who says, "What do you feel is the best way to learn GTO?"
Well, I would first want to know what your current level or understanding of poker and in specifics GTO is. For starters, I mean, as for any topic, just go on Google and type in some keywords, see what comes up. There's probably a couple good video introductions on poker coaching sites. So there's many coaching sites, but of course, there's also probably some really good videos on our coaching site, the pokermarket.com marketplace, where you can find videos on anything, including GTO content. In terms of books, there is one which is called Math and Hold'em, which is a more basic introduction to poker math. And then if you're looking for the more advanced GTO content, there is Mathematics of Poker, and there is a Professional Heads Up No Limit. Those are books which you can search for, which are then a little bit more advanced.
Great, great. That's good advice. I hope, Cat Daddy, that answers your question. I want to go back to one question I had on my list here. What's the hardest thing as a coach to teach your client or the player that comes to you that wants to learn poker, that has a basic understanding of poker, but for some reason they're coming to you because they're not advanced, and so what is it that's the hardest thing for you to impart to them?
I think the hardest part to coach it, of course, varies from person to person, but it's the decision-making process, which is, which things do you prioritize, which information do you look at first when making a decision, and, how do you rank the other parts of information. So let's say someone makes a bet and you have a weak hand and you're not sure whether you should you call it, should you fold it, then you can think about, what do you look at first? You look at the speed at which the opponent has bet. Do you look at the size the opponent has bet first? Do you look at the HUD stats first? Do you look at, how does your hand rank in your own range? Do you look at, what does your opponent represent? How do you rank all these factors? And I find different players have different, decision processes which they go over first, which things do they rank how, and changing how someone thinks about that can be very, very difficult. So going back to the HUD example, I've seen players that look exclusively at the HUD, and you cannot convince them of a play that doesn't fit with the view of the stats they have. So they'd be like, well, but the HUD says he likes bluffing, so I must call. And you're like, well, but there's other factors which probably mean it's not a call. But the way of thinking is very difficult to change for some people.
Let's say somebody came to you that was playing 25 cent 50 no limit. They were playing six player. They were playing the full table. They were playing maybe 2-3 tables at one time, and they were holding their own. They kind of know a little bit about poker. They've read books. They've looked at videos and everything. They want to make the next step up and everything. Well, how would you go about the coaching session that you're having with them? Where would you start, or how would you go about teaching them or coaching them?
Right. So first of all, someone who's at the online no limit 50, 25 cent, 50 cent level is already, and then holding their own there is already a pretty solid player.
Okay.
So that's already quite the accomplishment. The coaching plan I would choose for them does depend on how much time they're willing to invest, or how much money they're looking to jeopardize for a couple of coaching sessions.
Right.
But generally, the quickest way to get good feedback is by, if they play on a site which provides hand histories, to look over the hand histories they've played through some statistics program like Hold'em Manager, and see leaks or problems in the most basic situations, such as pre-flop ranges. Which hands do they prioritize over other hands? Is that correct? How do they play post-flop? Do they fold somewhere way too much? Do they not bet somewhere enough? And based on those, small statistical indications, you can sometimes find someone having, consistent leaks that they're having, and this can be very beneficial in just a few coaching sessions to find out, 2, 3, 4 adjustments to strategy that have a big impact on the win rate.
The other day I was at the hospital. My wife was at an appointment, and I was taking a look at this book right here. It's Small Stakes Hold'em by Ed Miller, and in here Ed talks about running the percentage. If you're online and you're on the button and you're first in, and I may be misquoting him here, but he says it's a plus play to always steal, no matter what two cards you have. If you you steal from the blinds, you're going to win 70-80% of the time, unless there's somebody that's in the blind that for a fact is somebody that's pretty wise and pretty savvy to the game. What do you think about you're playing 4, 5, 6 of these tables? How often are you stealing from the blinds? Would you consider the cards, or is it just the position?
Well, I think the information there is certainly correct, though a little bit outdated. I think in most live poker environments and in on the maybe the smallest stakes online, that is true. But these days, if we're talking about even, 10 cent, 20 cent online poker, you cannot raise on the button or steal on the button without looking at your cards. It's not going to be profitable these days. Most players in the blinds have gotten so good at dealing with button steals that you can't. It's not going to be profitable. And there's actually been lots of trends in the high stakes games going around changing button strategies quite drastically. So I myself remember a time back a few years where I did raise on the button as a steal between 90 and 100% as default, exactly how it's written in the book, and that is a good strategy. But nowadays, I actually find myself sometimes doing the opposite of not even stealing any weekends on the button, just playing, hands which I'm comfortable defending if there should be more action. And yeah, this is sort of where we are with all the GTO stuff going on. No one really makes any big mistakes anymore where you can just, do one thing 100% of the time or so.
So you're really blending. You're blending it. You're taking the best of everything that's been out there and tried over the last 5 to 10 years. What's been written, what's been tried at the table, what statistics are out there. So there's going to be sometimes you're going to do a little bit more based on the weakness of your opponents, and sometimes you're going to stick to just the cards that dictate that you can play that way or play back at somebody. Is that correct?
Yes, well, you should have a pre-flop default, which is just which hands do you raise in every position, and you should stick with that. And it's certainly not going to be, all hands on the button or 90% of hands on the button. It's going to be something like more than half of the hands or so you're dealt. And if you play that as a standard strategy, you're going to at least be reasonable. But of course, you should always be willing to adjust away from your default and potentially raise more hands, potentially raise less hands, depending on the circumstances.
Okay. One of our Twitch mates that over here on Heartbeat Poker is Noodle the River, and he says, "Isn't GTO based on being balanced? If you're balanced, how do you exploit another player? I mean, isn't it more defensive rather than offensive?" You have any response to that?
Right. So there's a lot of confusion about what GTO does, and it actually does two things at the exact same time. The first thing is exactly what Noodle the River is referencing is when you play a GTO style, a GTO strategy, you cannot possibly be exploited. You are perfectly balanced in every way fathomable. However, at the exact same time, a GTO strategy also maximizes expectation against a good opponent. It is also the only strategy which makes sure that you win the maximum possible. So it's sort of this two-way approach, which sometimes is only looked at from one perspective.
I get it. And then follow up with that, Decryptny says, when do you think GTO or explorative strategy is most effective, and how do you recognize which strategy would be best to use?
Right. So I get this question a lot in coaching, so I actually have a very good answer for that. And the main concept which lies at the heart of every poker decision you will ever make is you want to make the decision which has the highest average expectation, the most plus EV decision. And if possible, that is an exploitive strategy, that is an exploitive decision, that is one we talked about, like raising on the button with every single hand. If that's profitable, you should absolutely do that. And you should only revert away from this exploitive approach of making the maximally EV decision when you don't know what that maximally expectation decision is. When you're just not sure, you can't determine, is it better to bet or not? It's difficult to say. In that case, you revert to your default strategy, which is a GTO-based play.
Okay. And one of the other questions earlier on I meant to get to is, what do you think is the weakest part of most players' games right now on the internet? Those that are playing online, but what is the one thing they should work on more than anything else that you see more times than not when you're playing? What is the biggest mistake you're seeing? Where's their weakness?
Well, that's a very broad question. So it does depend on the site you're playing on, the stakes you're playing on, the game variety you're playing on.
In general, is it bet sizing? Is it they're not they're is it mostly position? If they worked on one area to improve their game, what do you think the most common area is that they make the most mistakes?
Well, one thing I would have answered maybe a year or so ago is certainly the big blind play. I think a lot of players play really poorly from the big blind,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes folding too much pre-flop, oftentimes not check raising enough on the flop and turn and river. Um, so I think I would answer that. These days, though, I see even at smaller stakes, very good pre-flop play from the big blind actually. So I think that has sort of yeah made its way down from the higher stakes to the lower stakes already. And I'm not sure. I think many people online are playing distracted slash too many tables, like not paying enough attention. They're just ramping up the volume or watching, a Twitch stream on the side. Perhaps some of our viewers are playing just now,
Right now,
and
yeah, listening to you, and they're losing money at the table, right?
so this attention deficit is certainly something which for a lot of people is true, but there's certainly other problems as well.
Yeah, we've got a player that's on Full Fledged Poker. His name is Ronster. He's on in the Twitch today, and I've been working with him over the years. And one of his biggest, I would say, Achilles heel is that he doesn't check raise enough out of the big blind, and
Hmm.
it's a very useful tool, especially when you see betting and somebody out of position then puts this bet on you and you've missed everything. You're barreling with nothing. It's hard to stay in there.
Yes.
It's really difficult. But anyhow, he's learned. He's working with it, and he's going to do pretty well. Who's the toughest player, either live or online, that you've encountered at the tables? In other words, giving you fits or just oh man, I can't figure this guy out. This guy is so good. Is there anybody out there like that?
There's a play style more than an individual player, which is very difficult to deal with, which is, I mean, I like to call it the Russian style because a lot of people whose location is displayed as Russia or Belarus are playing a style,
Yes.
which is a very raise heavy style at all spots and pre-flop, post-flop, everywhere, very very aggressive, not unbeatable, but does put you into a lot of very tough decisions. So this is the pre-flop style, similar to what Poker Snowy advocates, with a very high three bet, very low fold to four bet type style, and extremely high c bet, extremely high two barrel. But then not folding to raises. You would think someone who's this aggressive would fold to raise, but no, 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 they don't fold.
They don't false. And do you have a favorite player, either online or live or both, that you want to share with everybody here today? Is there somebody that either a lot of people hold Doyle Brunson, but do you idolize anybody? Was there anybody out there that inspired you that you said that wow, that guy really knows how to do it?
Well, I
Or
do admire people that treat poker more as a science than as a game. So one of the first people I admired is the Bryce. I'm not even sure what his real name is. That's just an online screen name. Is one of the best fixed limit hold'em players that has ever lived. He's retired from the game a year or so, or a couple of years ago. But he made videos on back then it was called Stocks Poker. Now they're owned by Card Runners,
yes.
and he made some really great content which I really enjoyed. These days, someone like-minded, which puts out similar content, is Alex Sutherland, I believe his name is. He's the guy behind or working with GTO Range Builder. He puts up free videos on YouTube, which I like a lot. And I'm actually not sure if he's a very good player or not, but he is a very good poker scientist, if you could say that.
Can people that are listening to this follow you on Twitch and watch you play?
I do have a Twitch channel, however, I rarely stream on there. It's a hassle to set up and to get into the right mindset for it, so I apologize. But I do have a Twitter you can follow. It's twitter.com/Paul and then internet, and the internet merges with the L of Paul, so it's Paul and then Nternet.
Got it. Got it. And how about any books that are either new or old that are relevant that you would suggest to listeners, whether they be cash or tournament players, that they must have in their library? In other words, they can have all these other books that people have talked about over the years, but if they had to have a few books that definitely should be in their library, is there some that you would just point out to them right now today?
There's a couple books which I've enjoyed over the years. I think anything I've ever read from David Slansky has been good. Some of his works are surely outdated and not applicable to the online landscape, but still, he makes so many great points about poker, about strategy that I would.
Advanced. He's a lot of advanced. Yes.
Yeah, so David Slansky, of course, there's The Theory of Poker, one of the most famous poker books ever, but he's written also in more recent times books. I think one is called Gambling, Poker, and Life, which I like. There's one of the newer ones is called Do You See Why? DUCY, I think.
Ducey.
Which
Yeah, Ducey. Yeah, he did that with Alan Schoonmaker.
Yes, I enjoyed that one. So those are some more of the classics. There is the Matthew Hilger books, which we talked about earlier for like beginners, used to be very good. These days for beginners, I would recommend what is it? Ed Miller's books, which you already referenced before. There's the Getting Started in Hold'em, and then there's the Small Stakes Hold'em by him, which are very very good books. I think they're
The Course. I just reviewed The Course, and that's an excellent book too. Have you had a chance to read The Course?
no, I'm not sure what is that.
It's called
Who
by
wrote
Ed
it?
Miller. It's called The Course.
Oh,
Poker's
must be
like the
new.
game of golf, and he takes people from 1-2, 1-3, no limit, up to 2-5, and then to 5-10.
Okay. No,
Excellent book.
I've not read that. There's the 1%. Is that also
That's
by him?
another
I
book
think.
he's right.
Yes. So I'm not up to date on his news publications.
No, that's really good. When I put a review up, and matter of fact, in last month's Andy Up magazine, I write for them, and I did a review on The Course, and it's in there. You just look up my name towards the back of the uh, magazine where all the articles are, and there's a review on it there. This week, or this month, it's playing Ace King and continuation bets. That's the article I have in the present one. And before we go, and I really do appreciate your time today, taking time out of your busy schedule on a Sunday to be with us. Do you have a favorite tip that was either given to you or you want to pass on to our listeners today?
I'm sure. So there's it's always important to set goals in life if you want to have a productive life. It's mandatory that you set yourself some goals up. But I got an extra tip from a veteran poker player here in Edinburgh, and he said it's not just important to set goals, but it's important to attach decisions or to attach actions upon completion or upon failing of the goals. So what I find is that sometimes you set yourself, I want to be at this limit by the end of the year, and then you either achieve it or you fail, and very often you just sort of disregard your old goal setting and you keep going as you were before. But it's important to say beforehand, what are you going to do if you make it your goal? What are you going to do if you don't make your goal? And then actually follow through with the decisions you've made in the past.
I can live with that one. I had a book that I published a couple of years ago called The Poker Journal. And one of the tips that's in that book, I'm going to read it to you, and you can tell me what you think about this tip. Expect to make more money from loose players over the long haul. However, you can also expect to make money in the short run playing against opponents that play too tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that when you're at the tables, most people are so involved, like you said before, with their HUDs and stats and everything, that they're not really concentrating on some of the people at the table. They're just going by the numbers, and sometimes the
Yes.
numbers can lie. I
Yes.
really do think the numbers can mislead a person because of the opponents that those people are playing against. I just think that sometimes you have to use your gut, you have to use your natural instincts to root out who's doing what at the table, and then exploit it.
Right. No, I do believe in trying to quantify as much as is possible, but in some situations you have a feeling which is very, very difficult to quantify, and if you're a veteran, that feeling is probably not ill-fated, but you should go with it.
I have one last question from Jerry DeQuipney. He wants to know, Paul, how long did it take you to pick up online tells, and do you still pick up new ones?
I Very difficult question to answer. I think online tells is just a thing which is one of those very difficult to quantify things. Sometimes I just feel like something is off about a bet, and then it feels bluffy, and then I can't really put my finger on it, but more times than not, it's correct. Do I still pick up on new tells? I think it's all done by the subconscious brain somehow that's interpreting things which you can't vocalize, which you can't articulate. New tells, I mean, there's some tells which I definitely can quantify, so about the timing and the bet sizing, but there's also some things which are just very elusive.
I understand. Well, Jerry, here's the tell. When Al says that we want to thank Paul Otto coming to us today from Edinburgh, Scotland, for his time and his insight this morning, that's a tell saying that the end of the show is very near. So thank you again, Paul. I really do appreciate it coming on with us. We're going to record this. We did record this. We're going to put it up on YouTube. We're going to put it out on social media. I would ask all the listeners, when they do hear this, if they would share it with their friends, anybody in the poker world, because I think the insight that Paul has provided today is just so great that we don't hear from enough people that are grinding away. And Paul, my thanks to you for taking the time. His site is Poker Market. Please check it out. Check out his videos. Check out his coaching. Check out the whole site. Let him know there's feedback on the site. You can let him know how what you think of it, and if you got questions, he's very readily available to answer those questions for you.
Yes.
Paul, any parting comments?
No, thank you very much, Al. It's been a pleasure to be on the show, and thank you for Heartbeat Poker for hosting this, and it's been great. Thank you very much.
All right, take care, everybody. Certainly do appreciate it. All the best.
Bye-bye.